This is the Observations Podcast for Sunday, the 9th of February, 2025. Michael is gone at the moment. We've spent the last 10 minutes trying to get his sound working on his computer, and it hasn't worked. And I can see him, but I can't hear him. His mic isn't working, and it's been a thing. So he's back in admit, so we're going to try to let him back in, and we'll see what we can do once he logs in. See if he's got his sound back. But it has been a struggle, as it sometimes is. I run into this myself, where for whatever reason I'll start up OBS and I have no sound. Now, I generally start doing show prep between 3 and 4 o'clock, so I have like an hour to figure out what's going on. But I've had it happen to me in my regular day job, where I do multiple customer webinars per month that go on for anywhere from half an hour to 2 hours. And you always think that, well, everything is going to work. I'll just pop up OBS and I'll just go live. And sometimes you pop up OBS and you don't go live. And so that's a real pain in the butt whenever you have a customer webinar. So Michael, say words. Unfortunately, I'm not hearing those words. So I can't hear you. Can't hear you at all. So keep going is what you're saying? Or wait a minute, what? Oh, you're going to cut it out. Okay, hold on. We'll cut you off right now, and I'm going to go ahead and continue on, and hopefully Michael can get this fixed and can work. So here's what I wanted us to talk about today, and I guess we'll go ahead and talk about it because there is just so much to unpack here. And that is, and by the way, while we're doing this, let me shut off the Zoom window for this until Michael gets back. So I'll just float here as a disembodied head and shoulders above the text. So there was a CBS poll that came out just today, earlier this morning at 9 o'clock from CBS. And they asked people, how would they describe Donald Trump? We're now 3 weeks into his presidency, and these are the most common descriptors that anyone has had for Donald Trump. Tough, energetic, focused, and effective. 70% of voters believe that Donald Trump is doing what he promised he would do in his campaign. I'm not sure what the 30% of voters believe who say he's doing something different from what was promised, because if he's doing anything different, I can't tell what it is. And by the way, I hear my dog doing something in here, and so I'm going to step off screen and close this door so that we hear less dog and more me. In any event, 70% saying what he would do, 30%, I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know what they thought Donald Trump told them he would do that he's not doing now, but whatever. 53% of voters approve of Donald Trump's overall job rating, which I believe is the highest approval rating he's ever had. 59% approve of his program to deport immigrants who are in the U.S. illegally. 64% approve sending troops to the U.S.-Mexico border. We don't want large detention centers when determining who should be deported. I guess we just want to get them out of here. Which, okay, fine. Not sure that makes a lot of sense, but it's an opinion, I guess. I think that this polling is a reflection of Donald Trump actually coming in and doing what he said he was going to do. And for the most part, people approve of him doing what he said he was going to do, at least as we move now into what will be the fourth week of his presidency. Last week, Michael and I talked about all of Trump's executive orders and how big of a change it was, how much of it was overturning what Joe Biden did. Little did we know that those first 2 weeks were barely a warm-up for what we are getting now and what we have gotten in the last week, which has been unleashing Elon Musk and Doge on the federal government, primarily on USAID. And by the way, I just thought it would be interesting if we went in and we do another little screen share, and let's go to USAID.gov and take a look at USAID's website. This is, I believe, the cleanest website design I have ever seen. That is USAID's website. And the intention is to shut USAID down. USAID is an interesting organization. USAID was created in 1961 by an executive order from John F. Kennedy. And it was largely created, and by the way, Congress went back in later and formalized USAID's existence, but USAID was basically a front for the CIA. It was a way to funnel U.S. government money into countries to build up all sorts of capabilities that did not exist that would assist both our intelligence services as well as the Department of Defense in setting up capabilities that we might need in case of a military intervention there. It was also set up to run what are delightfully called information operations in foreign countries to help try to prevent communist takeover of the press and other institutions in those countries. And it was all done with this wonderful acronym, the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID, and they've always referred to themselves as USAID. And the thing that's so wonderful about it is it makes it sound like it's just an aid organization. We're here to help. Now, technically, that is true. We were there to help. We were there to help us and to help us fight the communists. And wait a second, I'm getting a Michael Wade, please admit me message. So let me see if we can get him back. And if so, we'll be good to go when he gets back. So, well, it says he's connecting to audio, so we'll see. So anyway, USAID has basically been a front for the intelligence community and more largely the national security state that we started building in 1948. And of course, from 1961 to 1991, USAID was largely focused on building out these sort of capabilities. It also used to have a much smaller budget. And we're talking, as of, I think, 2010, it was only like 1.6, $1.7 billion. So it was, relatively minor budget. That has grown in the last 15 years. Last year, their total budget ran to about $40 billion. Excuse me. Now, for a government that spends $6.6 trillion, it's not that big of a deal in terms of the actual tax money that's being funneled through there. But there has been a fundamental change to what USAID does. During his presidency, Barack Obama signed an executive order. Now, prior to that executive order, one of the key limits on the U.S. government in general, and USAID in particular, because one of the things that they did were information operations, propaganda, for lack of a better term, in foreign countries. Barack Obama signed an executive order that eliminated the restriction on USAID and propaganda efforts in the United States. So USAID could propagandize in the heathen foreign lands as much as they wanted. What they couldn't do was do that here in the United States. Obama overturned that. And since that executive order was signed, a lot of USAID's money has been going to various non-governmental organizations, including millions and millions to News Now, an organization that basically is supposed to fight disinformation and misinformation on the internet. And there were a lot of other similar organizations. Whatever good USAID might have done in the 60s and 70s and 80s, it really lost its reason to exist in 1991 when the Soviet Union collapsed. And like much of the national security state that we started building with the National Security Act of 1947, and which by 1960, outgoing President Dwight Eisenhower was warning us against, saying the national security state, the defense industrial complex, as he called it, was a fundamental danger to our liberties if we didn't keep them under control. Well, we didn't. And when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the national security state began casting about for other missions. Because without the Soviet Union, the reason to have such a huge defense establishment, such a large intelligence establishment, split up among the Defense Intelligence Agency, the Central Intelligence Agency, and the National Security Agency, plus all of the counterintelligence operations that are done by the FBI and a couple of other federal agencies. They needed something to do, and for a while they got something. After 9/11, there's a reason why we have such a big army. We can invade Afghanistan and Iraq for all the good that did us. But it became clear by 2010, 2012 that those were basically over. We withdrew from Iraq. Afghanistan kind of went to a sort of status quo. We'll just keep doing the same sort of thing over and over in Afghanistan. And so they at least found a purpose during the global war on terror. Of course, that's over now. And those agencies still need a purpose. And what it appears has happened is that USAID basically turned into this weird kind of money laundering operation where politicians would fund USAID. And so over the course of the last 10 years, USAID's budget's gone from $1.5 billion to $45 billion. And I see Michael is back. Michael, can I hear you?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. That is noise, my friend. Very good. We are cooking with gas.
Cooking with gas now.
Yeah, it's like I was saying when we first started off, it's really bad that this happens. And I don't know what causes it. I don't know why all of a sudden your sound settings just disappear. Because I've gotten to the point now that anytime I'm going to use OBS, I go in well early and I check my sound settings and everything to be sure it's coming through the right microphone, that it hasn't changed my levels, that it hasn't just switched me from stereo to mono. It's really frustrating. I don't know why it does that. And
it couldn't find my microphone for some reason, which was weird.
Yeah, that is it happens. You have to go into the audio mixer in OBS and try to manually find your microphone. But you're here. Great.
Yay.
So anyway, talking about USAID and what USAID seems to have evolved into, especially since 2010, 2012 or so, is this money laundering operation. Politicians have radically increased the funding by about 20, 25 times of the money that goes to USAID. USAID is giving this money to all sorts of shady NGOs who do things like, propagandize Americans. And those NGOs, in turn around and give money to politicians for their campaigns. And so there's this great big circular flow of money. We give $45 billion to USAID. We spend maybe 5 or 6, maybe 10 billion of it on actual foreign aid stuff that we find is important. And the rest of it is all going to these NGOs. And these NGOs are turning around and basically giving politicians money to keep supporting them. I mean, it is. And the thing is, it's not a direct line of corruption. Right? I mean, nobody's doing anything illegal per se. It's just how this stuff works. USAID needs to go. It's needed to go since 1991. In fact, much of the national security state really has needed to go since 1991. The problem is there's no one left alive who was an adult in 1947 when we started building this thing. And it has been sort of the norm for the adult lives of everybody who's under, 90, 95 years of age at this point. We've always had the national security state. And now we don't really need it. And it doesn't really have a mission because there is no Soviet Union. There's no superpower world. And yet, like all government programs, it just keeps going and going and going. And Donald Trump turning Elon Musk loose on USAID and then on the Treasury Department, and there's legal stuff, so I'm so glad that you're here. This is the most radical start of a presidency and the first time in our lifetimes that we have seen a radical president take office since 1932.
Yeah, I would go back even further. I'd say since Calvin Coolidge and Andrew Mellon started reining in the budget.
It's been amazing what has been happening. However, we're now starting to see some pushback. Some of the pushback is just...
Some pushback.
Yeah, some pushback. And look, some of the pushback is just dumb. I mean, it's just super dumb. There's all of this stuff. We're worried about an unelected billionaire with unchecked power. Who elected anybody who works at USAID or the Department of the Treasury or anything else? Cutting wasteful spending is one thing, but giving an unelected billionaire free rein. Okay, unelected billionaire. Wait a second, what's this? Oh, the unelected billionaire wants to... Oh, I see, what is this? Elon Musk is unelected and accountable. He's a greedy billionaire. It's almost as if a set of talking points had gone out so that...
Journalist survives.
Journalist survives. It's all of this... Well, look, another one, an unelected billionaire. Of course, this is all coming from the usual suspects. And I think my first point is this avenue of attack, he's a greedy, unelected billionaire, is stupid as hell. And it's stupid.
It's blatantly classist, and it doesn't make any sense. He doesn't actually have any power. He can't do anything. He can only make recommendations. He's a special advisor.
The only power that he has is the power that the President of the United States gives him, which the president, by the way, could turn off at any time.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going after the bureaucracy, none of whom are elected themselves, by the way.
Yeah, that's the whole point, right?
Point number 2, if the president wants to let Elon Musk and make him a special government employee and have him look at this stuff, he can. He's the president of the United States. In fact...
And these are executive branch agencies.
Yeah, in fact, Donald Trump could invite me to Mar-a-Lago this next weekend. I could show up there and he could literally open up all of the top secret classified files about our national security and our plans, and he could show them to me legally because he's the president. And the president can authorize anybody to see any information, even top secret SCI information. So, stupid argument. I don't know why they think it would be a winning argument, and they actually have a legal argument that would work. Elon Musk is the head of 3 companies, 3 large companies, all of whom are regulated to one extent or another by the federal government, and one of whom, as a company that builds rocket ships, is very highly regulated by the FAA. Normally, if you're going to go into government, you got to toss all this stuff into a blind trust. You cannot be the CEO of these companies while you're working for the government. And so there are a ton of conflict of interest laws and regulations that they could throw at him. And they're going with the unelected billionaire bit.
Well, because what he's actually doing is going after their gravy train. And that's what they're mostly worried about. And him unearthing the absolute corrupt and disgustingly insider trading that's been going on between the U.S. Treasury, appropriated funds and also unappropriated funds, and what's flowing into the Washington NGO politicians, lobbyist coffers. This threatens the establishment at its core. And there was a reason that they went after the USAID first.
Because it was so blatant.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can track the money, government, NGO, political campaigns, or Clinton Foundation, or...
Right.
Yeah, interesting how that works out. I mean, he is going after a gravy train that has funded Washington, D.C. insiders, Bethesda County, Maryland, and Loudoun County, Virginia, for a good 20 years now.
Yeah, at a minimum.
Oh, yeah, sure, at a minimum. It is deeply corrupt, but not illegal. And
I mean, not that we know of.
Well, that we know of.
I mean, I think there probably are some illegal things going on when you see these cutouts being used to then fund terrorists that are on the do not give money to list. I mean, I would think that's illegal.
Yeah, and they're getting money from USAID somehow.
Right. It goes through some cutouts and then ends up in the coffers of the Palestinian Authority or Hamas or Hezbollah or whoever.
But what about this conflict of interest thing? I want to put that to bed before we move on. There is so much to unpack here. I hardly know what to talk about.
Yeah, right.
But the conflict of interest thing.
It'd be one thing if he was auditing NASA. That would definitely be a conflict of interest. If he was auditing, any agency that oversees his activities, yes, that would be a conflict of interest. Because I don't even know if he's being paid.
Apparently he's not.
Yeah. So
apparently he has a commission as a special government employee, and DOJ has a similar one. They have 6 months, and then they have to be either approved by Congress or what have you. So they have a 6-month window where they can just...
They've got a short leash, right? And they don't actually have any power. They can only advise. They can't shut things down. They can't do anything other than point to, specific instances in which they recommend that something be done about these streams of income. Like just today, I saw that they figured out, and this to me is just absolutely crazy, yet so believable. There is no deduplication of Social Security numbers.
Yeah, that just
so
came
you can
out
have
today.
like 10 people out there have the same Social Security number. Talk about rife for fraud. I mean, that's just amazing.
Yeah, and
But this is how governments work.
and by the way, if he goes after USAID, which in a $6.6 trillion government spends $40 billion, it is such a tiny drop in the bucket.
It's a drop in the bucket. But at the same time, you know what? Eliminating that waste, fraud, and abuse, it's not going to cure ultimately our overspending problem through Congress, but it is going to help tackle inflation to a certain degree.
Well, I think the point I was reaching for is if you can find this level of corruption in
one agency,
$40 billion agency,
right.
What's going to happen when you start looking at DOD? As Trump said today, he's going to turn him loose on DOD. Already turned him loose on Treasury, and we found out, I think on Thursday, no, I guess it was Tuesday, that Treasury standing orders are if you receive an invoice, pay it.
Yeah. And there's no charging code. There's no reason. Look, I work for a government contractor or a defense contractor. You have to, your accounting system, in order to be compliant, and this gets audited at random times and then at least every 2 years under NIST compliance and whatever else. If you don't have every expenditure and every bit of income allocated to the correct places, you can be debarred and possibly sued. And the federal government doesn't even slightly follow these rules.
Laws are for the little people.
That's absolutely ridiculous.
Laws are for the little people,
Right.
not for the federal government. The other pushback has been legal. So on Friday, the USAID website, which I showed just a minute ago, which is just a blank page at this point, what it used to have was a thing that said, oh, by the way, you're all going on administrative leave on Friday night at 11:59 p.m. That's no longer true. Catherine Coder Kelly, judge in the District of Columbia for the U.S. District Court there, basically has filed has issued a TRO that shows that says that they can't just fire everybody at USAID.
But
now,
they weren't fired.
Well, they weren't fired. They were placed on administrative leave, but they can't
paid administrative leave.
They can't even do that. But they did do a couple of things that did open them up. One of the things they said was, oh, we're going to pull you back. We're going to give you 30 days to get back to the U.S. and we'll pay for it. Generally, they give you 6 months notice when you're going to be forced to move to a completely different country. So they're saying that that is an undue burden. Judge Coder Kelly says that they're likely to succeed on the merits. Plus, she does quote the Consolidated Appropriation Act of Further Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2024, which requires the State Department and USAID to consult with Congress before, among other things, reorganizing, redesigning USAID, including by downsizing it. So USAID has some statutory, or at least the employees at USAID, who were the ones who initiated the suit, they're saying that there is at least a public law that would indicate that they can't all just be thrown out without, because this, putting everybody on administrative leave is essentially a complete reorganization and effectively a downsizing of the organization. You're going to need Congress to sign on to that. You can't do it by executive order. So she's put on a TRO. Obviously, the government is going to go back in. They're going to have a formal hearing. This is going to be a thing. So we're probably not going to get rid of USAID. But I read through this. It is a 7-page TRO. It does appear to have both that public law as well as the regulations in terms of bringing people back from foreign postings with a 30-day notice. There are apparently some regulations in place that make that a bad thing, which she quotes pretty liberally in her TRO. So USAID gets a second lease on life. Congress is going to have to do something, and with unless Pam Bondi can send the Solicitor General to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says the president can shut this down, which, excuse me, I'm not entirely sure they'll do because of the Appropriations Act. We're going to have to go through the full thing on USAID. So, okay, this is a setback. It is a legal setback. It is probably an overreach by executive order to shut the whole thing down and to fire everybody and to substantially downsize it. So, interesting, though, that Congress has managed to tell the president, you can't downsize USAID without us. It's just interesting.
And that's fine. The point of this flood the zone approach has been, they knew that there was going to be lawfare going on with all this, right? So let's get it in there. And so for example, with this particular case with USAID, okay, so we got to give them 6 months. All right, fair enough. We can fix that. We need to go to Congress. Not a problem. We'll go to Congress. We can comply with this and still get what we want. But everybody's on notice now. Things are going to be shook and shook hard. And then you hope for some attrition and, self-deportation, as it were. And, it ends up working itself out. You do this bit by bit, slowly and slowly and slowly. It drags out so long that you can never get anything done. Just throw the whole kit and caboodle at them now.
Yes. Trump's strategy and Musk's strategy, but I mean, whoever came up with the strategy, Trump had to sign off on it. And by the way, it's not like Musk is signing executive orders, putting these people on administrative leave. It's coming from the Secretary of State. It's coming from the President of the United States. So right. It's not like this argument that Elon Musk just showed up in Washington, D.C. one day and just marched into federal agencies without permission and began shutting them down. It's just it's gobsmackingly stupid. And I don't even believe that Democratic politicians believe that. I think
they don't believe that. They're trying to play against.
Yeah, it's all performative for moron level voters.
And also they're trying to get under Trump's skin by elevating somebody above him and hoping that he'll then take care of the problem for them.
Yeah, well, that doesn't look like a strategy that's working.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to work.
However, walking into federal court does appear to work more often than not because...
And that's fine.
The Treasury Department...
this is just stupid.
In the Southern District of New York. Now, I have read this. I've read it more than once. Paul Engelmeyer is the district judge who put in a TRO. It's good for a week till February 14th. First of all, on an ex parte basis. You
should explain what that is.
Oh, okay. Nobody on the Trump side had any notice of or opportunity to respond to this TRO. A bunch of attorneys general from New York, Arizona, California, Colorado, wherever, they're all highlighted here. They all just trotted into the Southern District of New York's federal court in Manhattan and said, hey, you have to stop Elon Musk from accessing any of the Treasury's financial data. And Judge Engelmeyer said, yeah, I will. And he did. But he went further than that. And what he said, and here's the weird thing about it. The states contend that this policy, inter alia, violates the Administrative Procedure Act, 5 U.S.C. Section 551, in multiple respects. It exceeds the statutory authority of the Department of Treasury, violates the separation of powers doctrine. I'm not sure how
that makes no sense.
I'm not sure how the president sending people into the Treasury, an executive agency, violates separation of power, but okay. And violates the Take Care Clause of the United States Constitution.
Which you can't violate that. It's not a performative clause.
Okay. Well, since this all seems like a very interesting conclusion, what does the judge say about the viability of these arguments?
Well, what he didn't address is...
He doesn't address any of it.
Or standing. What standing do any of these states have?
Well, yeah, I was going to get...
Involve themselves in the operation of constitutional powers.
Yeah, I was going to get to that too. First of all, these are state attorney generals. He says, by the way, that they will suffer irreparable harm. What irreparable harm will the state governments of California, Wisconsin, whoever, what harm will they suffer if the federal government audits the Treasury? How?
Yeah, he doesn't say.
In what way? Well, that's the thing. He doesn't say anything. He just gives you the court's firm assessment, is that for the reasons stated by the states, they'll face irreparable harm. But okay, you came up here
in an ex parte order.
Yeah, and you here's the thing. Here's what is alleged. Where is the discussion in this 4-page order of any of these assertions? There is none. He just accepts what the states say at face value. He provides no reasoning. He just says, "Oh, yeah, the states are right." Oh, and by the way,
he just cut and paste from their petition,
but without any of the reasoning as to why the Take Care Clause might be violated, or what the hell separation of powers has to do with any of this.
Yeah,
there's no discussion of it. He does, however, throw the fig leaf is, and I have to find it because it is really hidden down here in one sentence. Oh, yes. The court further assessment is that, again, for the reasons given by the states have shown a likelihood of success on the merits of their claims.
What reasons?
There are no reasons. That's the thing. This is the order. You know, it says it's a 4-page order, but actually the first half of page 1 is headers, and almost all of page 2 is a signature page. It's a 2-page order that just says, hey, the states say that this is bad, and I think they're right. So here's what I'm going to order. And he's enjoining the defendants, which is the Trump administration,
including the the Treasury Secretary.
Yes. So here's what can happen. No political appointee, special government employee, and any government detailed from an agency outside the Treasury Department to access any Treasury Department payment systems or any other data maintained by the Treasury Department containing personally identifiable information. So the Secretary of the Treasury, Elon Musk, anyone from no one is allowed to look at this. You know who is allowed to look at this? The only
bureaucracy.
The only people who are allowed to do this are civil servants with a need for access to perform their job duty within the Bureau of Fiscal Services who've passed background checks, security clearances, information training. And otherwise, the Department of the Treasury is restrained from granting all access to all political appointees. The Secretary of the Treasury, by the plain language of this TRO, is not allowed to see his department's data.
Right.
He's not allowed to have access to any Treasury Department payment record, payment system, or any other data systems So, is the Treasury of the Secretary, is any cabinet officer, are they some sort of constitutional monarch who can't actually give any orders, but who just serve as kind of a figurehead of the department? Because that's what this TRO makes them.
Yeah, essentially, that's exactly what it says, right? I mean, and the court arrogating to itself this power is, I mean, just wow. This would be impeached. It is impeachable. Not that Congress is going to take the time to go ahead and impeach, but I mean, this is an absolute overreach of power by the judiciary. He does not have this power.
Yeah,
it's absolutely ridiculous.
This is a district judge telling the Secretary of the Treasury that he cannot manage his department.
Right. From New York. Why the Southern District of New York?
Well, I think we all know why you would go to the Southern District of New York. Well, New York is part of it. So Letitia James filed the suit, joined by attorneys general from, 14 other Democratic states.
And yet, it doesn't confer any standing on anybody. It doesn't confer any sort of judiciability to the court itself. This is not something. This is completely within the executive branch.
I mean, the states don't have any more standing than I would have to walk into a court in France and demand that they change some administrative rule for the French government because I just didn't like it. But look,
yeah, that's right.
And even if the states, arguendo, were correct in every single legal argument that they made, it wouldn't matter because they're not parties to any of this.
Right. Because they're not affected by it. There's what possible harm could come to them by Elon Musk saying, hey, you know what? You should have charge codes and maybe explanations for why you're spending things.
Yeah, it's and yet there are a couple of jurisdictions that you can march into and know that there will always be a friendly Obama or Biden appointed judge sitting in that district.
And they're not all in Hawaii.
Yeah, they're not all in Hawaii. Again, Southern District of New York. And look, by the way, DC Circuit is no different.
They're just kind of busy with other ways of trying to undermine the Trump administration.
Yeah, but I find it interesting that they went straight to the Southern District of New York, not to the DC Circuit. Because this is litigation. I'll put that in scare quotes. that includes multiple states. So sounds a lot.
Yeah, normally this would be brought in DC. That you're absolutely right.
This sounds a lot like forum shopping for people who don't have the standing to find a forum anyway.
Right. It's such a mind-boggling, and it's not going to make any difference because it's going to get tossed. Matter of fact, the Second Circuit might even toss it before it even gets to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, but this is what Democrats have been reduced to. I mean, these are all, look, the USAID one, at least that comes from USAID employees. Okay, they definitely have standing. There's no way that you can not argue that. But this all reeks of desperation. And I think it's because Donald Trump did not come in this time just to sort of slowly try to change the federal government and chip away here and there. No, he came in hunting for bear. And
yep, this is beating the bushes, sending in the hounds, driving the prey into a trap.
And he's only got 6 months. He cannot do things slowly. He has to come in and start swinging a big stick, because if he allows the DC insiders time to collect themselves and to concentrate on a specific thing, they will slow him down in paperwork forever.
Right. He's gotten inside their OODA loop, essentially.
And so I'm, I as I said before you were able to get on, if we thought the first 2 weeks were, astounding in the amount of change he brought back in, that we hadn't seen anything last week when we talked about this. This past week has been amazing. And one of the interesting things about it has been that Elon Musk has just been going out on social media, where he has a big platform on X, and has just been laying out all this stuff, saying, hey, we found this, we found that, we found this amount of money going here, we found this going there. There is no, if this was 1980 and Ronald Reagan was doing this, we just wouldn't have heard about it, because the press would have just not reported on it, or would have reported on it in a far different way, to put a different narrative spin on it. The press doesn't have that power anymore. All of this stuff is now public. It's now obvious. We can all see it, which was what makes the Democrats saying, well, there's just this unelected billionaire who's doing... Wait a second, we're all watching it. We can all see what's happening. And those arguments might work for your moron-level, low-information voters. But for the average person who has at least a lick of sense, they're not seeing that. They're seeing what's happening, not the narrative that you're trying to push. Why are we
spending all this money on transgender plays in Ecuador
Serbia,
or wherever it was? Like, what the hell are we even doing? And you know who the first people to applaud this sort of transparency was? It was all those foreign nations that we've been sending all this money to basically upend their own cultures.
Well, this does get us back to the whole purpose of USAID in 1961, which was specifically to do that. USAID is and always...
But then it was supposed to fight communism and to undermine communist propaganda.
Sure, but once you've gotten in the business of undermining foreign countries and propagandizing, and then once Barack Obama signs an executive order that gets you into the business of propagandizing American citizens in the United States, and once there is no Soviet Union, well, you're going to do what you're going to do. And
there's only one world power.
Yeah. So again, this takes us back to the national security state. These organizations like USAID, they simply don't have a place in the modern world. If we get into another superpower Cold War conflict with China, we might have to bring them back if China decides to become expansionist in the same way that the Soviet Union was, with tentacles in Africa and South America and Asia. Well, we might have to bring it back, but that's just not the world that we live in. We have all of these national security state agencies that were created since the National Security Act of 1947, and who've really been given free rein because you got to beat the communists, and their time for free rein needs to be ended. But because they converted themselves into this money laundering machine for that one little section of the country, 2 counties in Maryland and Virginia, and well, maybe Prince William County in Virginia too. So 3 counties in Washington, D.C., nobody wants to see that money train cut off because they've managed to, through institutional capture, turn that to their own ends.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the gravy train the uniparty establishment is trying to protect. This isn't about Democrats or Republicans. Let's get that straight. This is about the establishment politicians, the Politico cohort protecting their interests. Because where does that money go? It goes to their cohorts. It goes to their donor class, who recycle the money back to them. And it's simply draining the coffers of taxpayer funds to enrich themselves and and their friends and family.
Yeah, well, as the redheaded
The
libertarian.
Bidens weren't very unique in doing this stuff.
No,
They were uniquely bad at hiding it, but they were not unique in setting these things up. There are much better hidden. I would assume the Clintons have a much vaster network that is much better hidden and protected than the Bidens have. I assume that Mitch McConnell has a very well hidden system. His wife's father is like a shipping magnate, like one of the wealthiest shippers in the entire world. Um, these people stick together because they consider themselves in a class apart. They're better than all of us,
it's what
and they should be making decisions.
Yeah, it's what John McCain back in the 80s referred to when he spoke about the culture of corruption in Washington. Back when John McCain was a Republican. But the redheaded libertarian put it as simply as possible. He's coming for your Social Security, Medicare, private info, blah, blah, blah. They lost their slush fund. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the entire argument. This is the way we've always done business. Even though we're taking our nominal government salaries, we should be able to enrich ourselves through these sort of back channel methods where we're actually having the taxpayers fund all of our little pet projects that make our donor class happy, and then they pay us. And by the way, this is not just a Democratic thing. I mean, the Democrats are making a stink about it now because Donald Trump is doing it. If it was Joe Biden that was doing this, like that would ever happen. If it was Joe Biden doing this, Republicans would be equally as angry. Mitch McConnell would be, turtling his way through the Senate, talking about how horrible it was that the president is going after our national security. There are not a lot of innocents in Washington, D.C.
No, not at all. And it's, well, it is appalling that we didn't know just how deep this rot went. But is it surprising? I'm not surprised. I mean, this does not even shock me. It appalls me, but it does not shock
me. I think what's shocking about it is over the last 10 years, just how blatant it's become. And how
arrogant they've become, and just like, they're not even trying to hide it anymore.
Yeah. So, you give, what was it, $30-40 million to News Now to censor Americans over COVID or all of the other misinformation things that they got themselves into over the Hunter Biden laptop. This was all being paid for with our money, with taxpayer money. And you can actually, clearly you can actually track the money. I mean, at least 40 or 50 years ago, politicians had either the good sense or the good taste to make it hard to track this stuff down. I mean, our current politicians have just given up on
it. They don't care. They feel untouchable. And let's face it, for a very long time they've been untouchable. And I'm loath to think that that's going to change anytime soon. But I'm hopeful, I guess. Well, I don't know.
They're just acting on the best available evidence that they had.
I mean, it's hard to blame them. They are rapacious, greedy, crony capitalists. And they're doing exactly what you would expect such people to do. And
they've been getting away from it for so long, you kind of feel this sense of invulnerability. I think what's really been interesting is over the last 10 years, how much of USAID money has gone into basically DEI and sexual orientation kind of things. That's not what USAID was supposed to do.
No,
we're supposed to propagandize.
It's actually the opposite of what it was.
Yeah, we're supposed to propagandize against the commies, not for them. And I just don't see how USAID is salvageable. Yeah, sure. Look, do we want a million African kids dying from AIDS? No. Are we going to end up giving some money to the heathen foreigners to help make their lives better in the pernicious hellholes in which they live? Yeah, sure. How come that can't just go through the State Department?
Well, and that's why Marco Rubio is now in charge of USAID.
Is he?
That's according to Trump and to him.
Yeah, well, we'll see whether Catherine Coder-Kelly, who, by the way, no friend of the Trump administration. Well,
the thing with Coder-Kelly, though, is while she is definitely a liberal, left-leaning judge, and you saw it in that one order you showed, she at least approaches it from a legal perspective and will show you the laws she's talking about. You know, the difference between that and the what's his name, Engerland orders is so drastic. I mean, she lays out, okay, well, these laws seem to be at issue here.
Paul Engelmeyer.
And then Engelmeyer is like, yeah, I believe everything they said. I'm just going to, yeah, that's good.
In fact, I believe it so much that I'm not even going to ask the Trump administration to respond.
It is emphatically the province and duty of this court to say what the United States government can do.
Yeah, and nothing's going to happen to this guy, by the way. The worst that's going to happen is this TRO is going to get overturned, assuming that Pam Bondi trots into federal court on Monday morning in New York.
It'll get appealed. Well, actually, I think there's a hearing
on the 14th. Yeah,
on the 14th, and that will be the first chance that the Trump administration has to address the merits of this petition for a TRO.
Yeah, well, let's hope the first thing
it'll be after that you would then appeal. You can't appeal yet.
Yeah, well, Engelmeyer, by the way, is not going to hear the argument on the TRO. It's going to go to a Biden appointee.
Is he a magistrate judge?
No, but apparently it is going before the Honorable Jeanette A. Vargas, a Biden appointee, who
I don't know her.
Will actually be who the U.S. government gets to show cause before. And I hope that when they do, the first thing they show is this is not a real lawsuit because these states have no conceivable standing in what the Secretary of the Treasury does.
And I expect that's what Bondi is working on right now, or her minions.
Yeah, it's just that this is not this is not a real thing. This is not a thing that can happen.
Did I wake up in Oz? This is a completely different world.
Well, that's the thing. I read this TRO and I really felt like I was taking crazy pills. Because this judge just says, hey, the states say that they're really unhappy about this and that may be illegal. Yeah, you know what? They're right. I'm just going to
look out for them.
Yeah, I'm just going to keep anyone in the federal government except the bureaucracy. By the way, who manages the bureaucracy? You know, all this talk
who does manage the bureaucracy?
Yeah, all this talk about the Constitution and all this stuff that the Democrats have been doing. Well, I got a copy of the Constitution around here somewhere that says the president runs the executive branch.
Mm-hmm. Okay, John, you and your unitary executive theory.
Yeah, well, look, the unitary executive theory wasn't entirely wrong.
No, it was not.
I mean, there may have been some implications
There
that
may have
took
been
a
some
little.
conclusions that were stretched. But
Yeah, we were taking some parts of it a little too far. But the president runs the executive branch, and the president, outside of the statutory restrictions placed on him by Congress, manages everything that happens in the executive branch. And
well, this is why I don't understand the whole civil service law. I don't even know how that's remotely constitutional.
well, here's the line you've got to walk. If you don't have any rules at all, what you end up with is the spoils system, and some guy that owns a used car dealership in Omaha, Nebraska, ends up being Secretary of the Treasury. That's not a great thing. And the other thing is that every civil servant can just be fired by the president, and he can just hire anybody he wants to, and so you don't have any sort of institutional knowledge. I mean, at the end of the day,
and how good is that institutional knowledge? I mean, I go back to Buckley, and
no matter
just pick the names out of the
no matter how much institutional knowledge you have, I think the important thing is what are you doing with it. And if you're just paying invoices without even checking to see whether these people are authorized to receive a payment, then I'm not sure you're doing your job. Or at least
they on the do not ever pay list?
Exactly. So you've got to walk this line. You do want some level of professional civil service so that there is continuity and some institutional memory of how the organization works. Especially,
I think it was an overexuberance with the labor movement and trying to introduce that into the federal civil service.
Well, okay, that gets us into public unions, which even FDR thought was an extraordinarily bad idea.
Exactly.
So, yes, the public sector union thing is a problem. The president should have far more power without some sort of public union getting involved about who gets hired and fired. It should be a lot easier to fire civil service than it is.
Especially for insubordination.
Yeah, that takes me to my point. Insubordination. It is the job of every employee of every executive agency to implement the lawful policies of the President of the United States.
Right.
Irrespective of their personal politics or their personal feelings. When you get a new, there's all this stuff about who elected Elon Musk. This is
elected Eileen, Jasper.
Nobody
who's running payroll at your local IRS office.
There was a Democrat on TV the other day. I think it was Cory Booker, who was talking about, well, this is just a hostile takeover of the United States government. No, this isn't the hostile takeover. The hostile takeover occurred on the 7th of November, 2024. When we decided to elect Donald Trump. We have hostile takeovers every 4 or 8 years in this country. Right. That's the whole point of it. So in November, when we said, we're going to give this thing back to Donald Trump, God help us, we did it. And now he gets to run the executive branch. And the other problem that I have with the Democratic arguments is, no. You've spent the last 70 years giving the president more and more and more power with all of this, the secretary shall determine by regulation.
Thank you.
Okay, great. You wanted to make the president an elected king. Well, guess what? You did. And now you don't like the king.
Glenn Reynolds always says, choose the form of your destructor. Well, you did it. I mean, this is literally what Leviathan, well, not Leviathan itself, but the warnings about Leviathan that came afterwards was all about. Look, you've created a machine so powerful that you can't destroy it. That's dumb. That's really dumb. Skynet, Terminator. Whatever. We Space Odyssey. We've seen this over and over and over again.
I can't cut the budget, Dave. I'm very
How?
sorry, Dave.
Cut the budget.
I'm very sorry, Dave. We have to spend this money. That's what Congress created. And if
Yes.
yeah, like the Glenn Reynolds thing. Never give power that you don't to your never give power to your guy that you wouldn't want your worst enemy to have.
Exactly. That's exactly right. That's why a smaller, less intrusive government is always going to be better. Look, in a perfect world, the election of the president is almost ceremonial. Maybe 20-30% of people vote because it doesn't matter, because it's not going to affect your life.
Well, unless
Yet
there's heathen
nearly
foreigners.
100% of the electorate votes for mayor or for their local representative, for their DC representative. I mean, that's a much preferable, uh, uh, situation to be in than this kind of thing where electing the president is the most important election in our country. That makes no sense.
Yeah, the only time the presidential election should be important is if you think you may have to kill some heathen foreigners.
Right. If we're going to go into war or we're in war.
Outside of that, the president is an administrative job.
Right.
Or at least it should be. Congress has turned the executive branch into a lawmaking monarchy.
Yeah.
Every time they throw in the secretary shall, by regulation. All right, you've just given up your power. And
in his or her discretion.
Yeah, and Congress wanted to give up that power because they didn't want to be in the business.
They don't want to make the decision
of having to go back in and make the decision and have the political fight. You know, if you want to buy a machine gun, you have to get an NFA license. You know what that costs? $200.
Oh, Jesus.
No, it costs $200. An NFA. Well, I mean, there's other things you have to do, but the NFA license itself is $200. You know why it's $200? Because in 1937, Congress said that it would be a $200 fee. And in 1937, $200 was a substantial amount of money.
But it's like $4 or $5 grand now, or actually probably more than that.
But Congress put it in the law that it was $200, and they've never gone back and changed the price of an NFA stamp. It's in legislation. They haven't even done that. So pretty much anybody can afford the $200 for the NFA stamp. It's the other thousands of dollars for the other regulatory hurdles that have been thrown up by the BATF that you have to go through. But the stamp itself is $200 because that's what it says in the law. And Congress doesn't do that anymore because Congress doesn't write laws. Congress says, this is bad. And if you do it, we're going to throw you in jail for 10 years. And
here's the guy who's going to decide.
And the attorney general will decide whether what you've done is bad or not.
Yeah. And I do want to say that I have concerns about how much of what Trump is doing right now is through executive orders. Undoing the Biden executive orders is one thing. Some of these things, I don't know, just seem like he's out over his ski tips.
Yeah, this Department of Education thing from last week where he's going to dismantle it by executive order. No, you're not.
I don't know that he can do that. I don't know that he can order, the transgender stuff. Now, I do think he has the ability to say, if you receive federal funds, then you need to comply. And even that's somewhat iffy. So there's been a lot of sort of edict pushing that's been going on, and I'm not comfortable with it. It makes me a little jittery.
Me too. However, On the Democratic side, I would point out that the same people who are saying that Trump is breaking the Constitution and ignoring the courts and all of this other stuff are the same people that clapped like trained seals when Joe Biden came out and said, hey, you know what? I'm going to give you your student loans. And the Supreme Court tried to stop me. And I said, hey, go fuck yourself. And we're going to do it anyway. There you go.
Yep.
That was from last May, by the way. That's less than a year ago. And this was all perfectly fine. This is, hey, yeah, sure. We got to, president can do that. And nobody argued on the Democratic side, hey, the president can't do this. He doesn't have this power. Of course, the Supreme Court said he didn't. And he tried to do it anyway. So don't tell me about your respect for the law.
He did it several times after that.
Yeah, don't tell me about on the Democratic side, I don't want to hear a word from you about your respect for the law and our norms and our constitutional rules, because you clearly don't care about it. This is all.
I don't want to hear it from most Republicans either, because they're just as seal-like. And frankly, as long as they get what they want, they're perfect. I think of like the Lindsey Grahams, the Tim Scotts, that they're perfectly happy to go along with the power moves. I don't like that. I find that disturbing. I mean, you still have your Mike Lees and Ted Cruz's, but they're far and few between.
Yeah. By the way, I'm sorry, chat. I've been ignoring you for this whole thing because I was so full of things that I wanted to say, and I so wanted to ask Michael about stuff and see what he had to say. I've ignored you. So, Chris Johnson says they've used NGOs to move the immigrants. That's got to be illegal. Yeah, there's a federal law that says you can't do that.
That's right.
And we were giving money to NGOs that were moving immigrants around. Jim McGinnis says taxpayers of the future, we're talking about the spending, since only a small portion of the spending is covered by current taxpayers. That's not true. Nearly 64% of all current spending is covered by the taxpayers. It's only the other 44%. Or 47%.
Well, but except when you count Social Security, which is supposed to be there for people in the future, but it's already spent, people.
Oh,
it's gone.
We've got 100 trillion or so in obligations to Social Security.
In unfunded liabilities.
Yeah. We'll never pay that. And then two more comments. Gulf of America and taking over Gaza, both presented as questions. So thank you, chat. So Gulf of America, actually, that is something the president can do.
Yeah,
and he can do it by executive order. He just tells the U.S.
Anybody could do that.
Yeah, he just tells the U.S. Geological Survey that the official American names for these things are the Gulf of America and Mount McKinley. Ta-da! Done.
Yeah.
The taking over Gaza thing, I will admit, I don't fully understand what that plan is and what it's about. And, I didn't turn on one of my lights. There we go. Oh, I look a lot better now. I don't understand the whole Gaza thing. Although I am certain if we do take over Gaza, the Palestinians will greet us in the spirit of gratitude and cooperation.
They're not going to be there.
For which they have become justly famed.
So it's interesting. And I thought Scott Adams, of Dilbert fame, had probably the best take on it. He said he pushed everybody beyond the sale. He reframed it so that, okay, this is a done thing, and here's what's going to happen. And it's an interesting psychological take on it.
Well, the funny thing about that is, while he was talking about, the U.S. will just take over Gaza and turn it into a paradise.
And not pay for anything.
And Benjamin Netanyahu was staring at him
standing
like a
right there,
deer in the headlights, like, where the hell did this come from? Which is one of the...
You know what he said to him? It was like, all right, watch this, BB.
Yeah,
just go with it.
That's one of the things about Trump. he has no filter, and he will just tell you whatever he happens to be thinking at the moment.
But he thought about it. What he did was create an alternate scenario that nobody had thought about. And what he did with that ridiculous idea was got people to start thinking, oh God, that's dumb. Well, it would be better. Huh, maybe that's not dumb. And again, pushed it past the sale. What he did was say, in not so many words, what we've been doing for the past 60, 70 years is not working. We're not going back to the status quo. We're going to do something else. We've got to raise this place and rebuild it. You can't live there. And it'd be cruel to force people to live there. So we've got to move them out and fix it up, and then we can bring them back in, and everybody else can come in too.
Yeah, and the first thing going through the mind of every government from Egypt to Saudi Arabia is not to our country, you're not.
Yeah. Well, they learned that the hard way when they took in Palestinians back in I guess it was like the 40s and 50s, and learned that they were hardcore Marxist radicals and were undermining their own authority and power. I mean, there's a reason that there are nearly as many refugees of Palestinian descent in Jordan as there are in Gaza and the West Bank.
Actually, not so much.
But they aren't Jordanians.
Actually, not so much in Jordan, because when they started causing trouble in Jordan there, something you don't hear much about.
They did kick a bunch of them out. That's right.
They kicked a bunch of them out, and they murdered thousands and thousands more.
Right.
Because once
Egypt is known for a long time that it didn't want to deal with these people. They'll let them go attack Egypt, but they won't let them settle anywhere. And
attack Israel, you mean?
No, Egypt. The corner of Egypt where that touches Gaza, which was Egyptian property.
Gaza was part of Egypt.
There's nothing there. Nobody lives there. There's like almost nothing there at all.
The Sinai Desert.
It's not even the Sinai. It's like it's like literally. Well, I guess part of it is the Sinai, but it's just desert. There's some camels wandering around. There's nothing there.
You know, one of the things that I find interesting about Donald Trump is that even though I have never been a person who believes that Donald Trump is playing, 10-dimensional chess at any given time, when he comes out with some of these what appear to be crazy things whenever he first says them, you do get the sense that this is something he's been thinking about. And I think the problem is trying to figure out how much of this, of the stuff that he says, is he serious about, and how much of it is he just noodling about and just thinking about and just tossing out crazy ideas to see what happens.
Well, that's his negotiating tactic. He asked for 120%. And if he can get 60%, 65%, that's a win for him.
Yeah, but on the plus side, when you're dealing with Donald Trump, and this is something that Bill Maher had, what's her name, the Reagan speechwriter, I can't remember her name, but he had her on. And
Peggy Noonan?
Yeah, Peggy Noonan. And he had her on, and she said, one of the things about Donald Trump, and it's absolutely true, is the level of transparency. You never really wonder about what Donald Trump is thinking. You never really wonder about what's happening there, because he can't help but tell you. And the difference between the Trump administration and the Biden administration in terms of how he deals with the press, the fact that he does, And he makes himself so available to the press, sometimes to their embarrassment. Like today, the guy from the Huffington Post asked him a question, and Donald Trump said, I don't understand your question. I don't even know what you're talking about. Who do you work for? Huffington Post. Huffington Post still exists? I didn't know that. I haven't read you guys for years. And then he just moved on. You don't ever worry, I don't think, where you stand with Donald Trump. He is not a classically deceitful politician. He will tell you to your face in the most blunt way possible what's going on.
But he does not disclose everything. He throws out his initial offer, but he's got other plans in mind. He kind of reminds me of Herb, the coach of the Miracle on Ice team.
I can't think of his last name.
I can't remember his last name at the moment. But he was famous for, well, obviously the Miracle on Ice, but amongst the players for pitting them against each other and then getting them to consolidate against him so that they play more solidly with each other. And he fucked with them psychologically in crazy ways. And that's sort of, Trump reminds me of that in a lot of ways, in that he's constantly manipulating your feelings and your thoughts to get to a certain place.
Yeah, it was Herb Brooks, by the way.
Herb Brooks, that's it. That's his superpower. It's why he's such a good negotiator, is because he sees the weakness, he sees the strengths, he sees what he really wants, and then he tries to get more. So he'll go for everything, and then he'll negotiate back. And anything he gets above what his breaking point was is a win.
Yeah, well, he told us straight up that he was going to bring Doge in and they were going to find all kinds of stuff. And he was right.
He knew. And that's exactly why they went to USAID first. He knew from his first term what was going on over there.
He knew where to go. And I think he also knew that the Treasury Department doesn't really know what it's doing when it comes to sending out money from the U.S. and who they're actually sending it to.
I mean, I could have told you that.
But. Yeah, but I think he also knows that in the Department of Defense, the only DOD organization that has managed to complete an audit successfully is the smallest of the American armed services, the United States Marine Corps. They've managed.
Well, isn't the Coast Guard part of it too?
Coast Guard is part of the Department of Transportation.
Oh, okay.
So Coast Guard is not a DOD organization. It's a DOT organization. The Marine Corps have managed to complete audits of their spending. And the Marine Corps, out of the $781 to $826 billion that we routinely give the Defense Department, the United States Marine Corps takes about $80 billion of that. So 10% of our entire defense budget goes to the Marine Corps. They're able to find it. The Navy can't possibly figure out how much it's spending money on. And, well, the Army and the Air Force are hopeless.
Yeah. I'm actually surprised about the Air Force. I would have thought that they would have been a bit more responsible, but it is what it is.
In 1986, prior to our attack on Libya, I coincidentally was transferred to Europe for a temporary duty assignment on a completely unrelated matter. And we flew over there on a C-5. And in the C-5, they had these Bunn coffee makers. You know the type. They have the glass carafe. You see them at Denny's and whatever. The Air Force paid in 1985 and 86. The Air Force was paying $600 a piece for those glass coffee carafes in their Bunn coffee makers. So when you say you're surprised by the Air Force's inability to figure out what they're spending money on, I'm not. I would be more surprised by the Navy, because back when I was a defense contractor, I worked for the Department of the Navy, and the Navy went through what they called the NMCI, the Navy and Marine Corps Internet Project. And part of that project was to implement SAP as a Navy-wide financial system.
Right.
And so theoretically, and they started that in 2001. So theoretically, by 2006, 2007, because the Navy could not possibly implement SAP in 1 year, largely because it's the Navy.
Almost nobody can.
But also because it's SAP and nobody else can either. But I mean, technically, every single penny you spend should have a charge number in SAP.
Exactly.
And you should be able to open up the Navy's top level SAP. You
should be able to go all the way down to the CLIN level and know exactly what was spent.
Exactly. So if the Navy, which has been using SAP for 15 years now, can't figure out how much money they're spending, then please, I can guarantee you that the Army and the Air Force probably couldn't count for more than 40 or 50% of their fund lines.
Hey, look, I'm all for the DoD being audited. I'd rather that the money that's spent on the military has more impact, and that we get the waste out of there, because frankly, especially the Navy, holy crap. I mean, when was the last time we built a Navy ship that's actually in the Navy? I mean, it's been years.
Look, there's an entire class of ships, the littoral combat ship, that the Navy spent 20 years building and that were a total disaster. I'm not entirely sure the Navy knows how to build ships anymore.
I mean, I'm not going to give it to that.
Outside of an aircraft carrier, they're great at that. But I don't know. I would expect them to find that the DoD is wasting money in such huge buckets that, well, the problem with the military is that our what we always call the tooth to tail ratio. So you've really got a very limited number of people out on the pointy end of the stick. But you got one hell of a big stick, which is handling all of the logistics and the procurement and all of the other things that keep those people at the sharp end in beans and bullets. And part of the problem is the procurement system that we have. One of the reasons why the Air Force was spending $650 on glass coffee pots for a Bunn coffee maker was because of the procurement rules that are imposed on them by Congress. It's not like you can just give a guy, hey, here's $25. Go buy a Silex pot. That's illegal. The glass has to be a certain thickness. It has to be tested to destruction. We have to see how sharp the edges are. There's just this unending, because the organization that I happen to be a defense contractor for did operational test and evaluation for Marine Corps weapon systems. And so you would take a look at a requirements document that had all of the procurement requirements that had to be met. It was, no wonder it cost $55 billion to produce a single jet fighter. I mean, part of the problem is we've become so concerned with the Defense Department wasting money that we force them to waste money to meet the rules that have been imposed on them.
Yeah, compliance. That's exactly right.
And so I imagine compliance costs and all of this stuff is just amazing. And
it's probably 30-40% of most defense contractors' budgets.
But it would require a lot of legislation from Congress to streamline the whole procurement process. But
and it's difficult because what they're trying to combat is favoritism, right?
Yep.
So they're trying to, create an actual open market. And they have done a bunch of stuff. So, you've got your micro levels, 50 grand and under, where you don't have to compete it, you don't have to justify it and that sort of stuff. But you're absolutely right that it drives up the costs of everything that the government buys, because in order to sell it, manufacture it, make it, you have to up your costs. And it doesn't matter what kind of contract, cost plus, fixed fee, it really doesn't matter. It's going to drive up the cost.
Yeah, I would be willing to bet that if you could reform the procurement system, you could probably cut 25 to 30% out of the defense budget.
I would think that's pretty close to correct, yeah.
With no effect whatsoever on the guys at the sharp end. They'd still have everything they need.
Again, because that money's now going to go back into what we really want, is people learning how to kill heathen foreigners and break things.
Yeah, and we're pretty good at that. It's all of the things that allow that to happen.
We're the fucking best.
Yeah, but it's all the things that allow that to happen where just tons of money are.
Well, it's like you say, or not you only, but what is it? Tactics win battles, logistics win the war, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Professionals talk tactics, or amateurs talk tactics. Professionals talk logistics.
Yeah, because if your supply lines aren't being fed and protected, then you've just got people out in no man's land.
Yeah. Well, look, Michael, we have been doing this for now. We've crossed the hour and a half mark. So I think probably what we should do is start the slow outro music and say goodbye.
Really only felt like an hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah. It went by super fast, huh? As always, pleasure talking to you, Michael. We'll talk to you again next time.
All right, buddy. Love you. We'll
Love you
talk
too,
to you next week.
For everybody else, well, thanks for watching. The number of people watching, I suspect, were rather lowered slightly by the fact that Super Bowl is going on while we're talking. For those of you who are interested in the Super Bowl, 34-6, the Philadelphia Eagles beating the Kansas City Chiefs. And with that, I will say goodbye to you too. Have a great week. We'll talk to you again next week. Until then, so long.